Welcome to our weekly LinkedIn Live leadership series, Voices of Leadership. Thank you for joining us today. I'm Kathy Eastwood, your host and founder and CEO of E equals Y. Each week, we dive into the fascinating world of leadership, featuring voices from various generations, industries, and backgrounds. There's no right way to lead. It's all about being authentic, aware, and consistently guiding our teams to deliver results. We achieve this through the E3 Leadership Code, expressing vision, engaging effectively, and executing with precision, all powered by emotional qualities. As we meet each leader, we'll uncover what drives them, exploring their unique leadership style, core values, and the experiences that have shaped their approach, as well as their adaptability in diverse situations. Before we get started, I invite everyone in the comments to introduce yourself. Let us know where you're dialing in from. Feel free to share your LinkedIn profiles, meet others, and pose questions as we go along. We'll address as many of your questions as we can throughout. Now, let me introduce you to our guest today, TC Kaiser, a good friend, an exceptional leader, and a great golfer. TC exemplifies E3 leadership and has been instrumental in helping me build the E3 leadership code. TC is a senior technology leader running international sales and global solution consulting teams at Accruent since 21. He has a broad experience in enterprise software, including executive roles at HP, where we actually met, and IBM. TC has over 25 years of experience in sales, professional services, working at the Big Four consulting, and serving as the CIO of three different companies in the healthcare industry. TC thrives on driving innovation, growth, and exceptional customer experience. And although his home is in Florida with his kids and his wife, he is a road warrior, traveling all over the world. So, TC, welcome. So glad to have you here.
Yeah, thank you, Kathy. Good to see you again. Glad to be here.
So, question for you. How many nights have you spent in a hotel versus home? Are
Oh,
we at
wow.
50-50?
Yeah, it's probably 60-40 probably when I after this last trip I just got back from Australia and Portugal, so it's probably maybe 55-45, but a lot, I can tell you that. So,
Well,
yeah.
I appreciate that you've had time to join us here live on this Friday. So, as you know, I'm a nurturing driver. I've been saying this for a
Mhm.
lot of years,
Yep.
and I like to get things done by caring for others. My mission in life is to inspire and enable people to accomplish things they didn't think were possible. And one of my core values is no one wakes up with bad intent. And one of my non-negotiables is constant feedback. I am
Mhm.
always looking for feedback.
Right.
So I want to give you an opportunity. Tell us about yourself. How would you describe your own leadership style and preferences, and what energizes you?
Yeah, so I think I would describe my style as more collaborative and coaching style. It's evolved over the years, but one of the exercises that you and I worked on, I came up with a tagline which I think is a little bit long now, but I'm a data-driven problem solver with a digital-first perspective that drives and delivers results. So, a lot of what crafted my style was in my consulting days, right? Loving to fix problems and figure out like what we can do to go fix things. Tended to be a bit more hands-on. So as I've gone through my career, I'm much more into coaching and I call it collaborative, right? I'm not I've always been uncomfortable with the more directing, autocratic. I never wanted to be that leader, right? So I wanted to be, hey, let's solve through the problems. Let's have a discussion. Let's kick ideas around and figure out the best way forward, and then go, right? And I try to be as much as I can a resource for my leaders. I try to keep in mind what I call the inverted pyramid, right? Which is, most organizations have the executive team at the top of the pyramid and it goes down. I see the opposite of that. I'm at the bottom. The people that interface with our customers, our employees, they're the folks at the top. My job is just to support them and do that in the best way that I can. And I will tell you that I was thinking about this last night. I think I've evolved a bit later in my career, which is, I used to be able to, when I say collaborative and coach, kind of giving the ideas, hey, you really should think about this. No, I think you should really go in this direction. Instead of, I've now moved into, and I'm not perfect at it, I can tell you that. But helping people come to the conclusion on their own. Well, have you thought about this? What's another way you could do it? And in our discussion, have them kind of come up with the answer. I don't give it to them. I help them walk through that process to develop their ability to see, how I see or my input. So they go, yeah, this is the right way forward. Okay, let's go with that. Right. So much more focusing on how do I develop my leaders as much as I can.
Yeah, it's interesting you say that, TC, because you came from consulting, right? So you did so
Yep.
many years. That's really what consulting was all about,
Right.
right? Was dragging that information out. And it's a skill that I didn't realize. I was an auditor in my first part of my career in consulting as well. And it really made a huge difference. It wasn't a training that I realized I was getting, but it was a tool that I took away. And I'm like, oh, that's why this is not as hard as I thought.
Right. Right. Yeah. What I found as well is that when you get to a point where your time becomes more precious, right? You've got so many different things to do. I kind of wear two big hats here at Accruent, running the global solution consulting organization and then running sales for our international team. You know, I don't have as much time for, hey, I need a meeting so I can ask you this question, or we can, how do I empower somebody to do it on their own if they're stuck, or I can help? Let's have a quick conversation, but let me not take over that problem. I want them to be able to try to solve it as much as they can on their own and let me empower them. And then if I can help, great, but that's a much shorter conversation. That's not starting at the very beginning and hearing the whole story and going through all of it, right? I want to empower as much as I can. And selfishly, it frees up my time, frees up my calendar. And you get to a point almost with from a survival perspective is there's not enough time in the day to be doing this, and I can't have everything route through me. Ultimately, I need to make sure that my team is empowered to act, to understand a situation, come up with the right plan of attack, and execute without me. Tell me how it went. I learned this, and this went well, this didn't go well. That's where I'd love to be. And we're getting there with a lot of them. It's not because of a lack of skill and ability. I think it's oftentimes you see the light bulb come on that I can do this on my own. Yeah, that'd be great. Let me know what I can do to help, or can I clear the way or move a hurdle? But I want them to be as independent and empowered as I can, because it frees up the whole organization. The more you can kind of push responsibility and accountability through your organization. I don't like the term down. I think of it again, inverted pyramid, push it up so they can act on their own and run their own business. That's what I like, the term I like to. You're running your own business. What would you do? Well, I do this. Then nothing stopping you, nothing in the way. Let's go do it. So that I think what I've found now is most organizations that do that really act in an agile manner and get a lot done in a short period of time, because you're not spending so much time sort of validating what you want to do or getting permission and covering your rear end and all that kind of good stuff. You just act and ask for forgiveness. And I'd rather have an organization that does that instead of takes 3 weeks to make sure that everybody's okay with the idea or the direction and everybody's on board. It's all a waste of time and effort in my book.
Now, I love that, and I think it's fabulous. But do you find at times that's a new concept for people coming in, and they have had a lot of different experiences?
Oh, 100%. You can see the light bulb, like I can do that. Sure, you can
Yeah.
do that, right? It's foreign that they have the ability to. They've always had the good idea what to do, and
Hmm.
they typically search for, who do I validate this with? Almost having thinking there's a requirement that I've got to get permissions, kind of probably not, is probably too strong a word, but I've got to get collaboration or consensus with everybody, just so I don't stick out, or I don't. And I think that comes from other organizations, quite honestly, where everybody's quick to blame, right? And ultimately, it's like, I don't want everybody to blame me if I get this wrong, right? And that's an unhealthy, I think, approach. One of the things that I really like about the culture of Accruent, Accruent's part of a global company called Fortive Corporation that's just outside of the Fortune 500, so a big company, and we embrace the concept of Kaizen, right? Continuous
Hmm.
improvement. And one of the things that is really, I think, healthy is there's a saying that you got to be comfortable with the red, which means that we're data driven, have all these KPIs, but when a metric turns red two periods, whether it's a month or a week in a row or three periods in a row, most organizations start pointing the fingers, which kind of drives me crazy. Whose fault is it? We're not doing this right. Whose fault is it? And getting comfortable with the red means, it's not a blaming exercise. It's something's not working. Let's go try to figure out why and put a countermeasure in. And then if it's still not improving, one or two periods later, then it's not finger pointing. It's that didn't work. Let's try something else. Let's don't wait till the end of the year to go, it didn't, that one thing we did didn't work, right? Let's try something else to see if that works. Nope, and we could try 5, 6, 7 things to work on that problem and still not point fingers. And that's a little bit of hard to embrace. It took me a while to kind of get that and go, wow, that's really good. Because that frees everybody up from, I'm going to get, you know, there's going to be repercussions from not getting this right. If I don't turn this thing green, for example, we have red and green. It's either yes, it's in the zone or it's not. But it frees people up to focus on what's the countermeasure. What can we do different? What are some ideas to bring to the table instead of, if I stick my neck out, I'm gonna get suffer the consequences. So anyway, I like that type of environment. It's a refreshing environment because I've been in other environments where, and that's one of my non-negotiables. It's the blame game, like politically, finger pointing. To me, there's so many of the things that we could do to be more productive when you don't do that. So that's what
Yeah,
I to help with my team.
yeah, that's great. And, I look at the blame game, and a lot of people say to me, micromanagers are so bad. And it is, but it requires creating an environment that you empower everyone along the way, because
Yeah,
fear creates a lot of that need, or, why people end up going into that micromanagement, because there's fear.
yeah, 100%.
And
Well, it goes back to, I think it was Google that did a study a few years ago now about, they looked at their teams and said, what makes a good team? And what they came up with was a thing called psychological safety, right? It's the environment that you're safe to bring your ideas forward and try new things. And you know that somebody's not going to same thing come down, and there's not going to be a consequence if you don't get it right. And that psychological safety is how you build a really good team. And ultimately that get comfortable with the red is that, right? At a broad organization that I think is very healthy, because is people get afraid to make mistakes. And sometimes if you do it right, that's where you learn the most. If you're not learning from your mistakes, that's the missed opportunity. And I want to encourage my team to sort of push the envelope a little bit. And sometimes you'll, drive the car in the ditch a little bit, and we'll tow you out and dust you off and get you over again. But I'd much rather do that than drive down the interstate at 35, gripping the wheel, afraid to get out of your lane, right? To me, an organization is way too slow. You're not serving your customers well if that's what you do. So it's just a comfort level. And the more I can create that environment as a leader, the better, I think. And that's part of my role. That's part of my job if I'm doing it right.
yeah, absolutely. And we talk about the psychological safety. Some of that comes from knowing where you're going, right? And
Mhm.
you talked
Yep.
about that is, I'm going to tell you where we're going, why we're going there. Make sure everyone's included. Making sure they know there's no repercussions, right? That's what drives people, and that's what brings the teams together. Now, I'm just looking at some of the comments here, and we've got Carrie asking, um, you know, do you some chaos is created as you're doing this, because it's change, right, for people, and it's different. So how do you handle that when not everyone is on the same page with you?
Well, I think it can be if there's no structure to it, right? So to your point, I think you've got to have a clear objective of where we're going, what we're doing, what's this KPI, what's the measurement we're going to use. I think if you don't have a measurement in place, then you get a bunch of opinions, right? And so I think the more structure you can have about what's the objective, what are we trying to change, improve, make better, and how do we measure it, especially in, you know, a lot of this Kaizen concept comes from manufacturing. And I will tell you that when we first embrace it, and our president right now says that when he started this, he's like, I don't see how this applies to a software company. And I think every leader that we have went through that. When you have sales or even pre-sales, every sales engagement is different. Every client interaction is different. How do we have a standard process? Well, it's the structure that it brings, right? That so you've got to be able to measure something. There's a way to measure it one way or another. They may not be exact direct measurements. They may be a little bit indirect, but you got to pick something and go with it, right? So having that structure to put together and everybody understands where we're going and what we're trying to do, and we're trying to drive pipeline. We need to be at 3.5, 4x. We're at 1.2. Okay, how do we close the gap? All right, we got a number to chase. Now, everything could be tied to pipeline, not everything, but in general, we'll do the fundamentals. Everybody's aligned with what you're doing. Then it kind of puts a bit of a guardrails around the chaos. But some of the chaos is good because I think what's amazing to me, and it happens quite often, is we try to bring people in to solve problems. We have a problem solving process that aren't from that group, aren't from that division. And I'll tell you, it happens. I've seen it happen so many times where somebody will say, well, they can see the forest for the trees. We get down into the details and the weeds and we're going at it. And I go, well, wait a second. That doesn't make any sense. Why don't you just think about that? And you're like blown away going, yeah, that's a great idea. Right. And so I think that's part of it as well, is giving people the ability to say, time out. You guys are getting way too far down a rabbit hole. You're missing the big picture. Back up a little bit. And you go, yeah, that was a great piece of advice. And it gets other people involved and feel like they're part of the process.
Yep, absolutely. And we've talked about this quite a bit when we're looked at the E3 leadership code. It's always bringing everyone back up. Where are we
Mhm.
trying to get to? Where's the
Yeah.
end goal? But getting everyone engaged. I assume you have a lot of different seniority on your team, a lot of
Mhm.
different generations, ways they like to do. You're working globally, so you have a ton of
Yep.
cultures. How do you bring everyone into the conversation when they have their own ways of working?
Yeah. Well, one of the things I've learned, especially over the last few years, is it's hard to apply one way to do things across an organization. I've learned a lot from my team internationally, how they do business differently, how you approach and messaging that's what I think is natural would not be the right thing to say or do. That there's you get all the different cultures when you in Europe, and this, you spent a bunch of time over there. So I'm still learning, and luckily I've got some team members that pull me out of the ditch when I need to be pulled out of the ditch, going, hey, we need to say it this way or do things a little bit different. And I think I guess what I've come up with is as much as we can, we need to act like we're a native organization in that culture, in that area, right? And it's okay to be different than what we do in the US, what we do in Australia, Singapore, the Middle East. It can be different, and that's
Mhm.
okay, right? It doesn't have to be, you can get, I think, spun up around some of this best practices and everybody does the same thing. And I'm just not as much a believer in that. As long as you have the foundations working, um, getting variability oftentimes is good,
Yep.
because we want to act like a global organization. And when I first started at Accruent, I had the team tell me that we're basically an American company acting like trying to sell stuff in Europe. We're not a European company selling a global product. It's good. I mean, it was a very good point. And marketing and how we do sales, product across the board. So our goal is to try to act like a more global company, and it's those little nuances you're talking about. So, but yeah, getting people involved, and people have differing experiences. I've got different experience levels, and the other thing I found in my career quite a bit is we tend to think about people's experience just at their current company and
Mm,
not what they did in a previous life. And I've got some folks that work with me that have some just fascinating experiences outside of Accruent before they were on board, right? And how do we leverage that? I mean, they didn't lose that knowledge. That's just not we don't ask them about that all the time. So you could have somebody relatively new that's got a ton of experience doing something somewhere else. Like, how come we're not taking advantage of that? So it's trying to take all of those factors and make sure. What I'm always looking for is what's that pothole that we're not seeing that we're going to run into, and can we see that so we could swerve out of the way I call it, right? So if there's if we're doing business in like the Netherlands with some of our team there, are we approaching this the right way? What are we missing here? And there's some approaches that you may have done that worked well in the past. One of the things that you know about different, we're a kind of a conglomerate of a bunch of, I think it's 17 acquired companies over 20 years. And one of the things that I asked a lot of my team members is, hey, when before you were acquired, what did you do that really worked? And I get all kinds of great answers. Oh, we used to do this, 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 and this, and it worked great. And it's like, well, why don't we do it anymore? I don't know. It's like, let's go dust it off and try it again, right? And it was just, it kind of got lost in the shuffle. So let's try to do that. If it was effective before, maybe it'll be effective again. And those are the ideas that kind of get suppressed sometimes with now you're part of a different company or different group. But it's all about ultimately how can we serve our customers and provide a great customer experience sales process? How do we, sell with value and get out there and solve problems with our customers? There's lots of ways to do that. I think there's an advantage when you come to the market with product, right? We're a software company, but really understanding the business issue that your customer is trying to solve and be that consultative relationship, I think really helps. And I think you can outsell people with that. Now, there's the typical sales craft, right, of how you folks, doing a deal and all that stuff. But I think they're just the way you engage. I that's kind of one of the advantages that I have, that I've been a CIO and I've bought a lot of software.
Mm.
So I oftentimes go, oh, how would I want to buy here? And if this sales team walked into my office, what would I think, right? And try to craft the way we approach things, just like I was buying the system myself, right? So there's a lot of things you can learn and we can do to bring in the experiences of our team and then be able to be agile in the countries and the areas around the globe that we work in, to be that partner, right? To really have a high level of customer experience before you're a customer and then after you're a customer. It works both ways. So that's what we try to do.
Yeah, and it's interesting as we're talking through this and I'm listening to everything you have to say, you and I are on the same page that everyone's a leader, right?
Mhm.
Whether you have people
Yep.
reporting to you or not. And I think, especially when you get into sales, you're a leader with your customers, right?
Yes.
You're helping them get from point A to point B. So
Mhm.
just as you're empowering your team to do certain things, you're empowering your customers, right,
Right.
to solve problems.
Yep.
So that just landed with me as I'm listening to you with all, everything in sales. So you're leading in with two different teams,
Yeah.
right? The customers are a team, and your own team is the team.
Well, we try to, one of the things that I did my first year, we used to call our pre-sales team sales engineers. And we were pretty much, I think we did 68% of the activities we did that year was just a demo, right?
Mm.
We changed the name to solution consulting because I want them to talk about a solution, not just show up and let me click through some screens and show you how it works. I want to sit down and say, what problem are you trying to solve? Let us help you. We'll bring how our software works. But I want to, in order to us to make sure there's a good fit, ultimately we're trying to find fit, right? And I want to understand what you're trying to do because I don't want to sell you something that's not going to solve your problem. And then I want to bring experiences from other customers too that may have approached it in the same way. So you can take advantage of that. So we try to spend as much time in what we call discovery up front, laying out that problem. And it's a consultative nature, right? Custom. It's funny on the vendor side or the sales side. I don't think we often realize the power of bringing to the table what some of our other customers did, right? As a customer, and when I was a CIO, it's hard to find information that's not just market speak, right? So I'd
Mm.
love to hear about things of tell me another customer that may have in my industry, my size, how did they approach it? What do they think about? Because I'm looking for things that maybe I haven't thought of and can consider. So they want that consultative approach, and that's where the pre-sales team often we play it off with the sales team. It's like, let's they know that the pre-sales team is not there to sell them something, right? And the more that we can have that approach and walk them through the problem, the more comfortable they're going to be. And I think it leads to better sales because again, we're just solving a problem, not just pushing you a product saying, hey, go buy this, it's great, right? Trust us, it'll work. No, we want to walk through the whole process and make sure that when you implement this, at the end of the day, good to us, the finish line is not a PO order that we can book. The finish line is the product is in production. You're getting the benefits that we talked about during the sales cycle. That's good because then we want to come back and go, let's go find another area to do it again. And if there's no trust through there, we haven't built up that trust through the whole process, we're not going to do it again. And the lifeblood of a SaaS company is customers over time, right? That's what we want to do. and we're cognizant of that. I could bring, and we could have a great big bucket of customers, and if there's a big hole in the bottom, and as quickly as we can bring new ones in from sales, they're coming out the bottom and not renewing. That's a problem. That's not a healthy business. So it
Yeah.
works both ways.
I'm loving everything you're saying because it is just so consistent, right? With leading a team and leading your customers, and
Yeah,
you're telling the same story, which is powerful because you're not trying to be one person or personality to one group and different to the other
yeah,
group. You just
yeah,
have that mentality of how do I serve? How do we implement? Where's the problem? How can we solve it?
yeah,
Right? And then the awareness that you bring along with it is amazing, right? Because that's the strength of leadership.
yeah. Well, I think what I found that we in really good sales opportunities, it gets back to, I know you're a big believer in the empathy piece, right, of the E. That having empathy for your customer, that hey, you're there trying to, solve and help them get better and build a capability, not just sell them something, but they can tell that, right? They can tell your intent. You don't have to say it, they can feel it. It's a relationship. You hear about relationship sales, that's a big part of it, but ultimately they, building that trust and credibility is about empathy, and you're there to help them do something, and oftentimes your product may not be the right fit. And I've had points in my career to say, hey, you could, what we have, we can do 3/4 of, right? You're probably gonna have to get something else to do another quarter of what you're trying to do. I'm fine with that, but I just want to be upfront, right? And people appreciate that. They want to get good advice, not just, hey, I'm going to say anything I can to get you to buy something. That kind of blows up in my experience pretty quickly. But that empathy, if you see it as, hey, great, this is somebody who can do something for me. Ultimately, that's it. That if you look at a prospect or a customer of, you're here because you could buy something from me that's going to hit my quota, and I'm going to do this, and you're something that can benefit me. You got it backwards, right? You got to go in with, what can I do to benefit you? That's my goal. That's why we're having this conversation. And it tends to change your outlook and your response to how you get there, right? So, and that works in sales, and it works post sales. I was just involved this week in a very difficult conversation with a customer, right? And it was a situation where we had our VP of customer success and I were on the phone. And it was an uncomfortable, tough conversation, but we tried to work through it as much as we can and understood where his frustrations were and some of the issues. And that's where you've got to rely on that stuff. So it's easy in a sales, most of the time it's easy, but I think I rely on it more on the hard conversations where, it gets emotional and everything else, that you've got to understand and bring is even more empathy to those conversations. And sometimes they're hard, don't get me wrong. But as much as you can, it gets back to people like buying from people. And sometimes there's tough situations, but if you can handle them with grace and you know, with a lot of caring at the end of the day, as much as you can, I think that's remembered. And I think you can make a bigger impact in those situations than you can in a normal kind of a sales situation. They'll remember that for a long, long time. How
Yep.
you act in a crisis and how you act when something goes wrong has a much bigger effect, in my opinion, of a client relationship than what you do in the normal course of business.
Yep. And it's the same thing with your people that work for you, right?
Oh yeah.
It's the exact same. The more you treat them with respect and have the empathy, they
Yep.
show up and all of that. We're getting good feedback here. Love the commentary. We've got a question. Along with the good habits people bring from earlier jobs, how do you spot or correct bad habits they're also bringing without giving offense or losing their enthusiasm?
Yeah, it's a great question. I think it's back to getting feedback, and you've got to be pretty quick. I will tell you that I don't think I approached this earlier in my career like I should. I'd notice things that would happen two, three, four times, and then kind of get in and give some feedback. Hey, you could probably handle this differently. I've become much more of, you got to give feedback in very timely manner, but it's got to be handled in the right way, right?
Mhm.
After a presentation or something, hey, have a little conversation on the side. Hey, next time do it this way. I've got a senior leader on my team recently that this person presented to a more of an executive level and did a nice job, but had some tweaks, right? Had some things that I think he could get better at. And we had that side conversation, right? To say, you have a tendency to do this. And, it was when he gets nervous and everything else. You have a tendency to do this. You probably don't see it. I can see it. You can't, but think about doing it this way differently, right? And it was presented in, not you messed up or, well, that could have been way better. It went well, but it can be better if you do this, right? This was
Yeah.
great, but here's how you continue to get better. And you come with, with some empathy, saying, I'm just trying to help you get better for things that you don't see and a blind spot that you may have. And that's the way to do it. You can't let it happen 2, 3, 4 times, because then it becomes less, uh, I like to, and I can tend to get with my team, try to find little things that may be nitpicky, but I think they add up and they appreciate it. I don't want other people to see that. I want to help my team correct it where nobody misses it. You know what I mean? If that was a perfect world. So you got to be able to have that conversation early, because people most of the time appreciate it and correct it in a very short period of time and nobody notices. And that's what I'd want to do, right? How
And
do I get
when they know they can trust you, right?
correct?
That's the thing.
Right.
They know you've got their back and you're
Yep.
doing this to help them be
Yep.
better.
Right. Yeah, 100%. And I've had quite honestly, some times where people have come to me with feedback going, again, it works both ways on the relationship piece, and told me that I didn't handle something right. Right. And, that's when you got to say, yeah, you're right. I apologize. I'm going to do that better. Right.
Yeah.
So it works both ways. It's easy to think as a leader that you just get to get the feedback. But if you really do it right, your team's comfortable going, TC, you didn't handle that right. And I think you should do this way differently. And you got to say, you're right. And
Yep.
I'm going to work on that as your leader. And it's okay to have bottom up. That's oftentimes the best feedback, right?
Yeah.
Is tell me how I'm doing. And that's how you grow as a leader. Because my experience is, I don't know if you've seen this, is that the the higher you go in the executive ranks, quite honestly, the less feedback you get.
I know.
And that's the hard part. So the more I can get from my team, the better. But people think about, as they move up, that they're going to get coached and get a lot of feedback to help them into these executive roles. That's why mentoring is so good. But I will tell you, there's a real lack of time and effort spent coaching and developing people at a certain point in a company, right?
Yeah.
That's just my experience. It may work other places great, but you've got to ask for it, and you've got to have a mentor and do things like that to continuously work on yourself as well. Because I think you have a tendency to kind of think that you have it figured out, and then sometimes you get some really good feedback that is sometimes hard to hear, and you think to yourself, wow, how come I wish I had gotten that 6 months ago or a year ago, right? So
Yeah. No, I agree. And I think experience changes.
right.
And, you and I have talked about it a ton. It's easy to lead when times are good.
Right.
You really learn when things go wrong.
Yeah. Yeah.
So I'm very conscious of the time. I could talk to you all day, and
Yeah.
I see everyone's still engaged. But to wrap things up today, and hopefully you can come back and we can talk some more.
Sure.
But what would one piece of advice you'd have for up and coming leaders, that are trying to be better and really be able to engage with their team and deliver results?
Yeah. No, great question. So I often find folks that have never they want to be a manager, we'll put it that way, and a leader. And they kind of think the process is that you're going to do all this work as an individual contributor, and somebody's going to pull you in their office or get you on a call and say, you know what, we've been watching what you do. You're doing a great job, and we're going to anoint you to be a leader, right? It doesn't work that way, right? You can be a leader, like you said. Everybody can be a leader. Start doing that job. Start taking on new things. Some of the best managers I had gave me, things to do, brought me in and showed me what they did, and it basically offloaded some of the stuff for them that I could do it and learn. So be a leader. You don't have to be a quote unquote manager and have direct reports to be a leader. Start working on that style and think of yourself as a leader and go act that way. Because then people I think, that do the promotions and bring people up, go, well, yeah, she's doing that today. So yeah, I mean, I don't have to think about what you will be like as a leader or a manager. I can see it, right?
Yeah.
It's much easier to to move up into organizations if they go, well, she's been doing that for 6 months. Yeah, absolutely. Why wouldn't we promote her? Right. So, everybody can be a leader. You don't have to wait for somebody to, give you the keys to the boardroom or the club or whatever. It never works that way. Right. I used to think that a long time ago is if I could just make manager, if they could just see what I do, it doesn't work that way. Go be a manager, grab the reins and just go prove yourself and get coaching. That's the best way to drive into leadership because you learn your own personal style. You learn what works, observing people, what works. The best leaders you see, the work. I learn more from the worst managers because I say to myself, I'll never do that if I'm in that position. And if you take that and say, I'm going to do the opposite, you're generally pretty good. So
And
that's what I would
we
say.
did a session, right, with some of your high pose ones,
Yeah,
and it was great because some people actually stepped away and said, "I'm all in being a leader, but I don't want direct reports."
right, right.
Right? Because sometimes it's a different job. Most people just assume, when you get promoted, it's the same job. It's completely
Right,
different.
right.
So.
Yeah.
All
What?
right, we could go on and on,
I
TC,
don't
but I
know.
want to be conscious of our audience. So thank you so much for joining. Learned a ton. And I think the biggest thing I'm taking away from this one, which I already knew, but I'm going to share it again, is, how similar sales and, just leadership and management oversight is. And, care about your people, care about your customers. They're first and foremost. Everything else will follow.
100%. Thanks so much, Kathy. It was great to see you again.
Thanks,
Really enjoyed it.
TC. Take care. Have a great one.
You
Thanks
too.
all.